Here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. We are here on a Monday. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us here this week. No Reed Mouse this week. He is out of town. He's on vacation. He will be back next week. So we are in the 10 o'clock slot here this week. Be on the lookout on Twitter for any updates. The plan will be to go at 10 o'clock for our show throughout this week. No show on Thanksgiving, but we'll be here today, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. Here, plenty to talk about as it relates to the NFL, college football, college basketball, NBA, all kinds of stuff that we need to talk about here on the show. But the plan is for us to be at 10. For whatever reason, if there's a guest that can only do the 11 o'clock hour, we will push it back to 11. So, again, stay on the lookout for that. But the plan will be to go live here at 10 o'clock throughout the week. No show on Thanksgiving, so just be on the lookout for that. But rough weekend for Cincinnati sports, obviously. The Cincinnati Bengals lose again. What is that, 8 of 9 now that they've lost in a row? That's not good. 26-20 to the New England Patriots. We have plenty to discuss as it relates to that. Defense actually taking some strides and steps in the right direction, but still some of the bad things that this defense does on a weekly basis kind of reared its ugly head a little bit at times in this game, but played good enough to win the football game, and I think they played good enough to win the football game last week there as well. So all of a sudden here, is it the offense? Maybe that's a bit of an issue here these past couple of weeks. There's plenty to unpack with that game. We'll talk Bengals Patriots. Again, they lose, and you would think Joe Burrow is going to make a return on Thursday. You know, a lot of people said, you know what, it feels like Joe Burrow is going to go out and play. Certainly a lot of people nationally did there as well. To me, it always kind of felt like 50-50. It was certainly trending in that direction, but I think the decision was probably made on Friday by Zach Taylor. Like, you know what, we tried this thing. We ramped it up Wednesday, Thursday. Let's give it another week, especially with the short week with the Cincinnati Bengals, of course, playing on Thursday on Thanksgiving in Baltimore. So I fully expect him, barring a setback this week, to be the guy on Thursday. But unfortunately, we talked about we're running the table as kind of a possibility going into the Patriot game. Well, I don't think running the table is going to do you any good here at this point. Now, let's not kid ourselves. That's not going to happen. But even if it did, you're 9-8. Probably not going to be good enough to get in. Obviously, you went 9-8 the past 2 years, and that wasn't good enough to get in there either. So we'll talk about Joe Flacco. I think he deserves to be a big part of our show, to be honest with you. What he has done since he has come here to Cincinnati has been unbelievable. Have the last 2 games against Pittsburgh and, of course, yesterday against New England. Have that been great performances from him? No, absolutely not. But when you just take a step back and kind of look at the big picture of the Joe Flacco era here in Cincinnati, because it feels like it's kind of coming to a close here, at least him as a starter, it's about as good as you could have possibly hoped for if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, and unfortunately, it's all for nothing for this football team as you only win 1 game where he was the starter and certainly had many other opportunities to win more games with Joe Flacco as your quarterback. But the rough weekend wasn't just the Cincinnati Bengals. Rough one for the Cincinnati Bearcats there as well. They played Louisville at the Heritage Bank Center. We spent a lot of time on the show last week talking about the game. And for UC, I mean, that first half went about as good as you possibly could have hoped for, right? If you went in there and said, yeah, it's going to take Louisville, almost 8 minutes before they score a field goal? Like, heck yeah, it's a team that was averaging over 100 points, right? Louisville did not shoot the ball particularly well at all. I think they could possibly be the best shooting team in the country when it's all said and done. So you had plenty of opportunities there in that game. You had a lead, but Louisville started to close the distance a little bit there towards the end of the first half. I think it was a 4-point lead at halftime for the Cats. You came out in the second half okay, and then you went cold. You gave up the lead, I think, with 16 minutes or so left in the game, and Louisville ultimately at that point never looked back. They win that game by 10 points. I've got lots of thoughts on that. We talked about it last week with Scott Springer of the Inquirer, Cincinnati.com. I was at the game. Much was made of, it's not a fifth third. How's it going to be? I would say it was better than I expected, but it certainly wasn't good at all. And I think part of the reason why the environment had some juice to it didn't have anything to do with Cincinnati. Those Louisville fans certainly traveled very well. And, obviously both teams are red, so you can't really tell with your eyes kind of the split. But based on kind of the crowd pops when good things would happen for each team, kind of felt like 50-50. But there was a lot of Louisville fans in there. Wes after the game and Pat Kelsey as well were kind of like appreciating the environment a little bit, which, I get it could have been really, really bad, but it could have been so much better, and it's unfortunate that game was played at the Heritage Bank Center. But have thoughts on that game. And then UC turned around the following day, played BYU at Nippert Stadium on the football field. Much is made of Nip at night, right? How that's a great environment at kind of, a historic venue like Nippert Stadium. But all Cincinnati does at night is lose, unfortunately. And, my biggest takeaway from that game was just that's coaching stuff. That's stuff that can't happen when your team's going out there. I get they missed kicks, right? And that's a huge reason why they lost. But just when you're not buttoned up like that from an operational standpoint, you have turnovers in the red zone, and you get out physical like that. I mean, BYU, they weren't even throwing the football. They just had, that running back. They were giving him quite a workload, and he was just kind of running right through UC. Took it to him from a physicality standpoint. UC couldn't run the football there at all, and they just out-toughed him throughout 60 minutes of that football game. UC had opportunities, weren't able to capitalize, but we'll talk about that game there as well. We'll go around the NFL as we always do. I think when you looked at the slate going into the weekend, it didn't seem that great, but I think there were certainly some games that provided some hype, right? There was 3 overtime games in the NFL. That's certainly exciting. The Jaguars, they edged out the Arizona Cardinals there in that game. Dallas comes back. They were down 21-0 and came back, scored 24 unanswered points there, and beat the Philadelphia Eagles, who are certainly one of the best teams in the National Football League. So that was I'm sure people in the national media are not going to overreact to that story there at all. By the way, another I shouldn't say great week, but another winning week for best bets of the weekend. So if you tailed us there, that certainly is positive. But one thing I was wrong about was the Cleveland Browns. Now, again, I'm sure people in the media are really going to make a lot of his performance. He was good enough to win. He made some big plays. He certainly outplayed Geno Smith there in the game, but I don't think that was an all-world performance there at all from Shedeur Sanders, but we'll talk about that there a little bit as well. Some sports headlines we'll discuss. Speaking of the Raiders, Chip Kelly, he was fired. Shane Bowen, he was fired this morning, defensive coordinator for the New York Giants. Good college basketball slate again tonight. You got Alabama and Gonzaga, 9:30 TNT. That's going to be a great game. The Zags are 4.5-point favorites in that one. And then late afternoon, early evening, 4:30 tip, St. John's, Iowa State. That is a good game and a good Monday Night Football game, I think, as well. Kind of a sneaky good Monday Night Football game. Niners and the Panthers. And if the Panthers win this game, say what you want, but you got to start, looking at them as a potential playoff team, right? It sounds crazy to say that out loud with the Carolina Panther team, but if they continue to win some of these games, you got to put them up there in that conversation. So I'm kind of expecting a close game tonight on Monday Night Football. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about that there as well. Appreciate everyone as always. It is just us here for this hour. No guests. Hopefully have some lined up for later in the week, but it's just you and me here at Chatterbox Sports here on a Monday. But let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. They lose 26-20 against the New England Patriots, and there's several takeaways, obviously, you have from this game. The takeaway number one to me, honestly, the Bengals aren't good enough to win when they throw a pick six. I think you can really boil it down to that, right? If you're going to give the defense a touchdown, where you're at as a team and as an organization right now, you're not going to win, right? And maybe that's just me dumbing it down a little bit too much, and there's lots of other things that went wrong that contribute to the loss. I understand that. But Joe Flacco there in that spot, he said after the game he just didn't see him. Bengals, of course, had a pick six in their own earlier in the ball game. Geno Stone, how about that? He finally made a play, was able to be in the right place at the right time, pick off Drake May, take it the other way for 6. That was big. By the way, Geno Stone had a lot of tackles in the game. Geno Stone by no means is the answer, and I think we're all ready to move off Geno Stone, but probably his best game, maybe as a Bengal, but certainly definitely this year there as well. But Cincinnati just not good enough to overcome a pick six like that, and it was a bad one too from Joe Flacco. He kind of explained it after the game, talking to members of the media, where he's looking at T, the play's drawn up for T. T wasn't there, went to the check down, and watching it there in person, it was just way too late, and clearly he didn't see the guy, and that's as easy as it gets from a pick six perspective. And that just kind of took all the wind out of your sails right there at that point, because you kind of established some momentum early on. You needed to get out to a hot start at home, get the crowd kind of involved with the game, get them fired up. They did that. and you jump out to a 10-0 lead there, and you're in a good spot, and then boom, you throw the pick six, and next thing you know, you're losing the game, and you're on your heels again, and you're just not good enough as a team right now to be able to overcome that. And that's back-to-back weeks now, throwing a pick six. And I know there was the fumble recovery for a touchdown last week against Pittsburgh there as well, but I think the defense not good enough. We'll talk about the defense. There's lots of other issues, coaching issues. I understand that, but where this team is at right now, if you throw a pick six, you are not good enough to win. And they've thrown 2 pick sixes these past 2 games. Now I'm going to show love to Joe Flacco here in a second, but that just can't happen. Can't happen as a football team at this point. Defensively, the tackling was a lot better, right? That's something that's been an issue for this team. It was an issue early in 2024. It's been an issue basically all of this year. And, that's tough to really improve upon that, right? Because these guys, this day and age of the NFL, they don't really tackle in practice. Like how, from a technique perspective, a coaching perspective, an effort perspective, how do you clean that up? Well, they found a way to clean it up in this game a little bit. There wasn't, any jarring moments where it's like, oh, that was a horrible missed tackle that happened. Again, relative to what we've seen in previous weeks for the Cincinnati Bengals football team. So I thought that was cleaned up certainly a little bit more. Barrett Carter and Geno Stone, we talked about them being probably the 2 worst starters on this team. And when you talk about all the losses that they've had, I think Barrett Carter and Geno Stone belong at the top of the list for players to blame for what has transpired over the course of the past few weeks. But, they were solid in this game. Barrett Carter was all over the field. He had some tackles. Geno Stone certainly there as well, had the pick six. And, they made some good strides, I think, on defense. And people don't want to hear it. The fans don't want to hear it. I understand that. They look at it and say, that's another loss, right? It's another loss where you couldn't play complimentary football and you still, as a defense, had opportunities to make some big-time plays and weren't able to do it. I get it. But in this league, you're not going to fix everything overnight, right? This Bengals isn't going to go from being literally the worst defense of all time to being good, right? It's going to be baby steps. It's going to be, increments before things get turned in a positive direction. I thought defensively they made those strides in this game against New England. Now, ultimately, it's not enough to win the game, and that's all that matters. But from a defensive standpoint, these past few weeks, it has gotten better than what we saw prior to that, and they deserve some credit for that. I think that's, kind of a positive sign. I get, usually here on a Monday, Reed likes to come in and be all doom and gloom on a Monday, which I don't blame him, by the way, for doing that. I do not blame him at all, especially the way this Bengals season has gone. But starting out with a little bit of positivity here, I know people don't want to hear it, but it has gotten better over the course of the past few weeks, and that's resulted in certainly some better play. But offensively, I was thinking about this. Obviously, lots of people doing this, talking right now, or doing the what-if game. Like, do you win if Joe Burrow plays? And I think you do, right? And now that's kind of a couple because, you were losing all these games. And the offense was kind of, hanging in there, and there was lots of issues defensively. And you're like, would Joe Burrow even be winning these games? Now there's a few where you're like, oh, yeah, Joe would have won that game. Oh, yeah, Joe probably would have won that game there as well. I think he would have. But I think the bigger question people should be asking is, do you win if Jamar Chase plays that game? And the answer to that question is yes, you do. So that suspension really hurts the Bengals badly in this spot because, when you have Jamar Chase and you have a guy like Joe Flacco, who's still new here, he's still kind of learning on the fly, Jamar Chase is that kind of easy button for him, right? That easy answer that he can go to whenever things aren't going his way. Like, oh, you know what? This play is kind of a mess. Looks like Jamar's got some space over there. Let me just give him an opportunity. And that was taken away in this game because of the decision by Jamar in the heat of the moment. Jalen Ramsey got under his skin, and he made a mistake, and he paid the price. I think the Bengals, paid the price with the loss in this game. And I get it. It's the what-if game. It's not always a fun game to play, and you probably shouldn't always play it, but we're going to play it a little bit here on a Monday. I think, Jamar Chase plays that game. I think you find a way to go out there and win, and obviously that was something that held Cincinnati back in this football game. But offensively, just kind of been clunky the past 2 weeks, and certainly, some of that has to do with what Pittsburgh and New England were able to do defensively. But Joe Flacco, he's playing through a lot here. He really is. And to kind of keep up what he had been doing, in previous weeks, certainly the Pittsburgh game on Thursday, the Jet game, the Bear game, probably unrealistic to expect him to continue to do that, especially as his health has progressively declined throughout that stretch there as well. And, when you look at this Bengals team, right? They went all in on their 3 superstars, and I don't know the exact percentage off the top of my head, but a significant portion of their salary cap is being dedicated towards Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, and you can even throw Trey Hendrickson into that mix there as well. And when Cincinnati had the football on that final drive with an opportunity to go down the field and pull off an incredible victory and win by 1 point against New England, they didn't have any of those guys out there, right? It was Joe Flacco throwing to Mitch Tinsley and Mike Gesicki and Tanner Hudson and Yoshi, just not Charlie Jones, right? It's just not, what you signed up for at the beginning of the year. So to even be in that spot, I think says a lot about this team. And, that's also something that we were having a close eye on for this Bengals team. Lots of teams in the NFL, when you're in a spot like this, kind of quit or kind of mail it in a little bit. And I thought we would see that, especially as we kind of saw it from some players defensively last week against Pittsburgh. How many business decisions did several of those guys make last week? Didn't see much of that. I saw a team that was hungry, saw a team that was feisty, saw a team that was trying to do everything in their power to go get a victory, and ultimately it didn't end up happening for the Cincinnati Bengals. But it does say a lot about this team and their chemistry, their work ethic, and their belief that they were able to continue to fight. And again, I get it. It's lame. Fans don't want to hear that. But, when you go against you weren't playing the Titans here, right? You're going against a team that I've had at number 1 in the NFL for several weeks now. And you gave them everything they could handle. And you had an opportunity to go win the game with the ball in your hand on the last drive. And obviously it wasn't able to happen. Joe Flacco. We talked about this. I've said this a lot about, NFL teams. When your quarterback goes down, pretty much your season, right? From a title perspective, if you come into the season with Super Bowl expectations and aspirations and your QB1 goes down, it's probably it, right? That's probably it. You look at Tom Brady when he went down in, what was that, 07 or whenever. It may have been a different year there with the knee injury. Castle comes in. He was great. But was it going to be, Super Bowl season? No, it wasn't, right? And if Josh Allen went down for the Bills, would they have an opportunity? No. Lamar Jackson for the Ravens, obviously he was down for a while. Now he's back. But if he were to stay down, no chance to win a world championship without him. And that goes for all these teams in this league. The Rams, they got a lot going well for them, right? They're good all over the place. Offensive line, defense, weapons, quarterback, coach. If Stafford goes down, that's it. That's just kind of where you're at in the NFL. And we said that when Joe Burrow went down week 2. It's like, well, you're 2-0. You're going to have an opportunity here to try to keep this thing afloat for him to come back. But if he doesn't come back, you're cooked. And then you go with Browning, obviously, for several games. That didn't work. You make the trade for Flacco. And this thing has gone as well as you possibly could have hoped if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. Trading for a quarterback, right, in Joe Flacco, and him coming in here and playing for, what has it been, 6 games now that he's been the starter for this team. It has gone as well as you possibly could have hoped. I get it. The first half in Green Bay, to expect him to do anything would have been ridiculous, and he was great in the second half. But the first half in Green Bay and the past 2 games against the Steelers and, of course, yesterday against the Patriots haven't been great. I understand that, but when you go big picture view and you look at all Joe Flacco has done through these 6 games, it is a shame. It is a darn shame that Joe Burrow is not going to be able to come back with an opportunity here to do something special. When the guy that you brought in, your third option this year, was a guy in Joe Flacco that came in and played the way he did, and you're still out of this thing, it's a shame. It is a real shame. And just everything Joe Flacco has done, I tip my hat to him, and I admire because it has been awesome. We talked about this even after the Bear game, where it's like, the Bengals defense is, ruining this for Joe Flacco. Like, he should be the story of not only the NFL, but the sports world. And the Bengals defense has taken that from him. And I get the past 2 games haven't been great, right? Joe Burrow plays the last 2 games, you win? Maybe. I understand that. But big picture, when you look at what he has done, coming in, he's turned into a journeyman. Obviously had a great career in Baltimore, Super Bowl MVP. We understand that. But ever since then, he's bounced around, and you're starting to see why a little bit these past 2 games. There's been some inaccuracy issues. He's kind of, had some turnover problems there, and that certainly probably contributes to why he's bounced around a little bit over the course of the past few years. But being able to come in and pick it up that quickly, and literally he walks in the door and boom, top 5 offense, right? That stretch for Pittsburgh, Chicago, New York, or Pittsburgh, New York, Chicago, you're the best offense in the NFL with Joe Flacco through that 3-week stretch. Unbelievable that he was able to do it. And when you couple that with his guts and his determination for guys that he doesn't even hardly know, it's absurd, right? Obviously, he's had the AC joint thing, right? It's in his throwing shoulder, by the way. I think there's a lot of quarterbacks in this league that if they had that, they would sit down, right? Now, as someone that's 40 years of age and he wants to continue playing and showing these teams that he is capable of being a starting quarterback, he doesn't really have that option. I understand that. But it would be very easy for him to sit there and look at the standings and say, okay, well, this team, we're not really going to the postseason, right? I'm not really trying to keep this thing alive. For Burrow, I am, but we haven't been able to do that, right? I don't know these guys. They're not like my brothers for life that I've been going to war for multiple years. I just met them, and I'm in serious pain. It'd be very easy to sit there and say, you know what, sit me down. I'm not able to go here at this point. Would have been very easy. He says, no, screw that. I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to compete, and I'm going to go to war for these guys, and I'm going to do everything in my power to put this team in a position to win. And then this game, he pops out his finger, right? I mean, he pops it out and then walks over to the bench and literally gets it popped back into place and then gets a couple warm-up throws, goes back out there, and then throws a beautiful touchdown to Mitch Tinsley, right? Again, not a left finger issue. That's the pointer finger on his right hand, his throwing hand. Pops out. It's all dislocated and funky looking. Goes over to the trainer. Trainer pops it back in, Kobe Bryant style, and he runs out there and he throws a touchdown pass, right? Again, very easy in that spot to look down at the finger and say, oh, that doesn't look good. I'm going to need to go get this looked at a little bit. I need to sit down for a second. Jake Browning, you can handle this whole drive. No, Browning goes in for one play. They throw it, by the way, which was, I mean, being at the game, you don't know exactly what's going on. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's 6 out there, not 16. What's going on? Oh, he takes the snap. Oh, he's throwing the ball. And you're immediately thinking, oh, Jake Browning's throwing a pick right here. It was a great play. And it was like 14, 15 yards. And, kind of keeps that drive rolling. And then a couple plays later, boom, Flacco throws it to Mitch Tinsley for a touchdown. So what he has done, and I was thinking about this as well, in the NFL or just in sports in general, when you lose, quality individual efforts and performances, that kind of stuff gets overshadowed. It's unfortunate, but that's just kind of the reality, right? It comes down to winning and losing. You're losing. So it's all going to be about the losing, why you lost, what went wrong, and nobody's going to be really spending some time on some of the things that went right. But this Joe Flacco run, these past 6 games, man, absolutely unbelievable that he was able to do this. And as equally unbelievable as it is, it's equally a shame that the Bengals aren't able to stay alive and have a chance here at this point. Because if you sat there and said, you're on to your 3rd quarterback, and he's going to play this well. And again, you didn't need to win all these games. Like literally, if you just hung on against the Jets and just hung on against the Bears, we're having a totally different conversation here at this point. And it's like, yeah, we gave Burrow another week to get healthy, and here he comes coming back against the Baltimore Ravens, and you're still right in this thing. But bad defense and, I guess bad offense the past couple of weeks have prevented that from happening. But just a major cap tip to Joe Flacco. I always will remember this run here, this 6-game stretch. I think Bengals fans always should for what he was able to go out there and do for this team. Again, guys he doesn't know. And he's 40 years old, has made millions of dollars, has a legacy. He could sit down, no problem, right? And he says, no, screw that. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to fight my tail off for this team in this city, and I just got here. Unbelievable. I'll always remember it. Bengals fans always should remember it. But unfortunately, like I said at the top of the show, kind of all for nothing here at this point. What else? Jermaine Burton. Worst pick of all time. Like, can we say that, right? Worst 3rd-round pick of all time, right? We were joking when his suspension was upheld and Bree was here. We were joking on off the bench. He asked me. He was like, you think Jermaine Burton's going to be active in this game? And I was like, no, I don't, right? He's shown me nothing. I don't think there's any reason why he's going to be active in this game. And sure enough, he's not, right? And that's just, who knows? I don't know if he's not. What's going on, right? If he's showing up late to stuff, if he's not putting effort, if he's got a bad attitude, I don't know, but you got to move off him, right? Because he's a wasted spot for you now if you can't even make him active on game day, especially when you have a receiver down. It's one thing to not be active when all your receivers are healthy, but then a guy goes down and he's still not active. Just absolutely embarrassing for Jermaine Burton and absolutely embarrassing for Duke Tobin and anyone that had a say in picking Jermaine Burton. Complete disaster. Again, it's a 3rd-round pick, so worst pick of all time. I don't know if you can say that. Worst third-round pick of all time, probably. Certainly in the history of this organization. Just a swing and a complete miss. Guy can't even dress on game day when Jamar Chase is down and he's on the team, right? He's in a practice squad guy. He made the team, right? But obviously there's still some guys that are going to be inactive, and he's been active all year. And Jamar goes down, he's still inactive, and he plays the same position. Just a disgrace and an embarrassment for Jermaine Burton, his family, and everybody that went into picking him in the third round a couple of years ago. Really no words as it relates to that. Mitchell Tinsley's awesome, right? I think we all fell in love with him in the preseason, and very early we're like, yes, put him on the team. Absolutely. He can be that wide receiver to kind of round out the wide receiver room. He's been awesome. I get it. It's only 2 catches, but every time he goes in and has an opportunity, he makes a play. Right, the play there for the touchdown, that's not some bum covering him now. That's Christian Gonzalez. Right, that's a guy that's one of the best corners in this league. Beautiful ball by Flacco, but getting open on that guy off the bench, whew, that's impressive stuff there from Mitchell Tinsley. We've had Craig Sandlin certainly pounding the table for Mitchell Tinsley, saying, let's get him in there, let's get him more activity. Absolutely goes in and delivers. Even if, T's probably not, he's not going to play on Thursday, right? Concussion, we'll talk about T in a second. You're not going to turn around on a short week and play. It's just not going to happen. Jamar obviously back. But let's keep Tinsley involved. Keep him in there and keep throwing him the football because that was awesome, his performance. Again, only 2 catches. It's not like he went out there and caught 7, 8 balls, but 2 catches. They were huge catches. I mean, the 4th down on the last try. Like, are you kidding me? Just clutch stuff from Mitchell Tinsley. He's a gamer, and, he's exactly the opposite of Jermaine Burton. He's exactly what you need. Just a guy that's, he's going to put the work in, he's going to grind, and he's going to be ready when his number is called upon. He's going to seize it, and that's exactly what Mitchell Tinsley did, and that certainly is very, very promising for the Bengals. But, you had some success with Chase Brown running the football, and you've had some success there for a while, but just too many drives that are stalled out. Again, Flacco was inaccurate in this game. I understand that. The pick 6 is huge. Past 2 games, Flacco has missed and has certainly contributed to losing the past 2 games. But I thought you ran the ball fine. And obviously we got to talk about Zach a little bit there as well. I thought his plan was fine early on. He got his team playing with a lot of fire early. To go out there and take a lead like that is huge. To fight throughout the entirety of the game. We talked about, Burrow's going to come back. That's going to provide a spark and a juice. Well, he didn't come back, right? It was still Joe Flacco, and they were still able to go out there and compete from start to finish, and I think that says a lot about Zach. But at the same time, that play in the 4th quarter, when it's 4th and 1 on your own 45, and you just try to draw them offside, I understand your defense had been playing fine, but your defense wasn't forcing 3 and outs. They still were giving up a lot of yardage, and a lot of time was coming off the clock. And to try to, there's this narrative in the fan base that Zach is ultra conservative and soft, which is one of the most false narratives there is about Zach Taylor, because it's not true at all. He goes for it on 4th down all the time. You remember these years with Burrow. If you got it 4th and short in the 4th quarter and you're, past your own 35-yard line, he's going, right? But he kind of fell into the false narrative there, and that was just ultra conservative and soft. I don't understand it. Again, the defense hadn't been giving up a ton of touchdowns, but they were giving up a lot of yards and chewing a lot of time off the clock, and that wasn't a Zach Taylor decision. That was surprised me, and to go up there and just try to draw him off sides and then ultimately not go, I didn't get that at all. And that allowed New England to go down the field, chew some clock, and kind of put you in a tough spot. Obviously, the Bengals still had an opportunity to win the game, but to me, that can't happen for Zach Taylor. That was a horrible call, and I would have liked to see that go a little bit differently. If you don't get it, fine, right? 4th and 1, you don't get it, fine. But you got to at least leave your team out there and give them an opportunity on the 4th and 1 to go take this game, right? He talks about that all the time. We got to, we're not going to have the game fall to us. We're going to go out there and try to take it. Well, you didn't in that spot, and that was a serious, serious mistake from Zach Taylor. Again, you're not playing the Titans. You're playing the hottest team in the NFL, right? And you're sitting there struggling, losing games left and right. You can't be conservative there in that spot. You got to go out there and try to get it, and ultimately they did not. Again, defensively, how about the goal line defense? Patriots had 7 plays on the 1-yard line for Cincinnati and didn't score. Crazy. It's hard for me to believe, right, that this defense was able to do it, but they deserve a lot of credit for that. That front, I thought those guys played a lot better. New England certainly got banged up on the offensive line, and that is noteworthy. Will Campbell has been one of the reasons for their success. They got him early, and, talking about the Bengals not hitting on draft picks, Patriots hit on Will Campbell, I can assure you that. Rookie left tackle, he's been tremendous for them. He leaves the game, so that certainly was a big change in the game, which, by the way, if he's going to miss some serious time here, that is a huge loss for New England. They lost their other rookie on the interior at that guard spot there as well. So I think that certainly contributed a little bit. But, 7 plays on the 1-yard line and didn't score on any of them. You deserve a lot of credit for that. If you're the Cincinnati Bengals, then it'd be very easy in a spot where you only have 3 wins to kind of just say, you know what, be my guest, waltz into the end zone here. But that defense but did not do that. And, Al Golden deserves some credit for that there as well. And, when we sit here and we evaluate the big picture at the end of the year, yes, we're going to go off on the defense, and we're going to go off on Al Golden, and rightfully so, and go off on the personnel on the field as well. But these past 2 weeks, it's been good enough to win. It's been good enough to win, and your offense hasn't been able to match it, which is a shame, considering they were the best offense in football the previous 3 weeks before that. But, again, we talk about this Bengals team all the time. You want to sit here and complain that, they still gave up a bunch of yards and they still gave up, 3 third and 11 still, 2 or 3 third and 11s? You can do that. That's fine. But when you made the decision to pay Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, you weren't going to have an elite defense. You would sit there and say, middle-of-the-road defense, that's going to be good enough for us. We'll take that. Well, they've been middle of the road the past 2 weeks, and it hasn't resulted in wins. I understand Jamar and Joe and T at the end of the game weren't out there, but that's kind of what you got to live with, and the defense has played good enough. If the defense has played like they did the past 2 weeks throughout the entire year, we wouldn't be sitting here going off on the defense, or we certainly shouldn't be. Again, some of the stuff reared its ugly head. Do you trust Bearcats or Geno Stone at all, even after they finally had a decent game? No, right? We don't. I understand that. Do you trust their tackling even after one decent game? No, we don't. Did they get a little bit fortunate that they scored on defense and it was their worst player, Geno Stone? Yes, they did, but you got to call a spade here. And when you look at how they played throughout the entirety of the game, it was like, well, yeah, that's a pretty significant improvement from the Jet and the Bear game. Now, I understand. Probably couldn't have gotten much worse. Probably couldn't have gotten worse at all. But it got better these past 2 weeks, and ultimately it wasn't good enough to win. T. Higgins, scary scene there. He goes down late in that game. It's hard to tell from where I was at. He kind of fell on his face. I didn't know if the guy landed on him or what, but he was not moving on the field. And that certainly was a very scary sign. T, obviously beloved in the city, one of your best players. And, it was a concussion. Saw his mom tweeted out that he's doing all right. So that's certainly a good sign. But, yeah, a concussion on a short week. He's not playing on Thursday. That's not going to happen. So hopefully we can see him again at some point this year. But Bengals probably, without Jamar Chase in this game, going to be without T. Higgins on Thanksgiving. So it's going to be hopefully Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase show on Thursday night. I would have liked to see him get a little bit more involved. It was kind of interesting. We were talking about, well, would they still do the too high stuff even without Jamar? Are they going to, cloud towards T and, double team him? He did see a lot of doubles. I think there was some opportunity maybe to get him the ball a little bit more. We talk about all the time, well, obviously one has to touch the ball. We understand that, but I think when they're getting the ball down the field to 5, that's when this offense is at their best, and that really opens up the run game. And that opens up, teams saying, well, shoot, we got to pay attention to him. Then you might leave one a little bit more wide open, and then you kind of just get rolling from there. Weren't able to fully get T. Higgins engaged in this game, and I think that contributed to your downfall offensively, certainly. And going forward, that's got to change. And I think, with Joe Burrow out there, it probably does. He understands the importance of T and getting him the football. But, I was expecting this to be the T. Higgins game. And I get it. It makes things a lot harder on T when Jamar's not out there. But I still thought he was going to be much more involved than he was in this game. He was not. Obviously, gets hurt at the end. Hopefully, he's okay. But, yeah, scary sight there. He was down for a while. They stopped play for a second there. And, luckily he's able to sit up and then get on the cart and go from there. But it looked like a pretty serious concussion there for T. Higgins. Mike Gesicki, was good to have him back. It didn't do anything crazy, but they were getting the ball to him early in the game. I think that's definitely what you should do, right? There's a reason you paid him. You kept him around. He's a really good football player. I think he's perfect in this Bengals offense, especially with Joe Burrow out there. Would have liked to see him get the ball a little bit more. But you just couldn't. You were in a spot all day where it was kind of sluggish, and you were like, "Oh, it's second and long. Now it's third and long." Right? We're going to try to run the ball. We're going to run the ball well, but we're still going to be in these third downs and not be able to fully capitalize on them. Joe Flacco took the bad sack there as well. That really hurt him. Knocked him out of field goal range in the first half. Again, that's not really a mistake. It's kind of like a Jake Browning mistake, right? That's not a mistake that Flacco had been making here in recent weeks, and that's huge, right? That is huge in this game, and that certainly held them back. Obviously, the pick six there as well, and it's just you had all that momentum. You're up 10-0. And then, boom, you blank and you're losing. And it just kind of the wind was sucked out of your sails there a little bit. And then you're just then you're on your back foot again. That's kind of where this Bengals team has been for the majority of this year. And it's not always a great place to be, certainly, on your back foot. Evan McPherson, another positive note for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's quietly had a really good year. And we talked about this year being huge for Evan McPherson. I'm a McPherson guy. I love Evan McPherson. I think if you're a Bengals fan, you certainly should. But reality, he lost you several games last year, and there was some question marks at that position. And as the years go on, that position just gets more and more important in the NFL. Kicker is just such a valuable piece to have. I mean, if you have a kicker, you can be so much better than having a guy that is a mediocre kicker. But Evan McPherson looks like he's back to kind of his rookie year, right, where he was just a stud, making everything. 63-yard field goal there to close the half. That was awesome, right? Because you're sitting there and you had the pick six, and you're like, oh boy, here we go. Did get the ball to start the second half, but you're like, how are we going to capitalize here to end the half? How can we get some momentum our way? And then Chase Brown, 21-yard run there on the first play, which that's kind of one of those experimental plays, right, where you say, all right, we'll hand it off, and then we'll be aggressive here if we can pick up a chunk. If not, we'll kind of just let this thing roll to halftime. But they got it, and they were like, okay, let's get on the ball. Let's throw it to T. Higgins, and let's kick a bomb. And Evan McPherson was there. He delivered it. That would have been good from probably 65-plus there as well. I think he had a couple of more yards probably there on that kick, but that was awesome. He's hit some big kicks this year, but they haven't you haven't been in a spot where it's like, oh, he needs to be great, right? Because you're losing in so many of these games, and he hasn't had tons of opportunities to shine, but he's perfect from inside 50. He's hit a couple of bombs, so I'm really pleased with Evan McPherson, how he's bounced back this year. Obviously, 6 more games to go, but last year was really, really shaky, and then you kind of went in this year going, well, if you have another shaky year, you might have to move off him. Evan McPherson has stabilized that position. He deserves a lot of credit for that. So that's kind of the takeaways there on the game. They lose 26-20. Again, some of the stuff, you might listen to all that and say, oh, you think the defense is great. No, but you just have to be realistic here, right, and say they've taken some significant strides these past 2 weeks. In the past 2 weeks, the defense has been good enough to win these games. And unfortunately, the offense hasn't been able to match that. You can play the what-if game. I think if 9's out there these past 2 weeks, you win them both. I think if 1's out there this past week, you probably win the game as well. It's the what-if world. At the end of the day, it means nothing. It's a loss. The tackling certainly was much better on defense. The tight ends, though, I did want to mention this. The tight ends have abused the Bengals for what seems like my whole life. Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper, 2 good football players, but they're 2 older guys that have been around the block, just kind of wiry veteran guys. They went off in the game. 10 receptions, 154 yards, and a touchdown. Combined as a performance from those tight ends there in this game. So I talked about right when we started talking Bengals, the pick six, right? To me, if you have a pick six where the team's at right now, you're not going to win. Well, also when the tight ends go 10 catches, 154 yards, and a touchdown, that's tough there as well, as that was kind of one of the things that the Bengals defense kind of didn't do well, right? They kind of just fell back to old habits when it came to their tight ends. But other than that, I think you saw a lot of improvement. You had new guys filing in and trying some new things out, and it's kind of, experimental season here at this point. As unfortunate as that is, you're just trying to see, like, okay, can this guy be a guy for us going forward? Okay, this guy hasn't had many opportunities. Can we put him out there and potentially have a chance to make something happen for us? So it'll be interesting to evaluate the team over the course of the next few weeks. Zach Taylor was very clear in his press conference after the game that when Burrow's healthy, he's going to be out there, and that is the correct decision. Running out of patience for people that don't think that's the right call, to be completely honest with you. And he's a football player, and when he's healthy and he's ready to go, he's going to go out there and play football because, winning is important to this organization. It should be important to all organizations in the NFL there as well. Sit here talking about tanking for a pay. It's November 24th, man. get your head screwed on properly. Can't have that type of conversation. You want to talk about, well, we got one game left, and if we lose, we have the number 1 overall pick, and then we can have that conversation. But we're sitting here on November 24th, where I got to sit here and say, oh, we need to lose some of these games so we get a better pick. That's complete rubbish. And when Burrow's ready, and I expect him to be ready on Thursday, he'll be out there, and he certainly gives the team a better chance to win than Joe Flacco. But Joe Flacco has been brilliant over the course of these 6 games for Cincinnati. Again, last 2 haven't been great. Progressively gone downhill a little bit. Let's not act like he's healthy. He's not close to being healthy, but a great opportunity that he gave the Cincinnati Bengals, and they squandered it away, let it go by the wayside, and only pick up somehow 1 win over those 6 games with Joe Flacco playing. But Cincinnati loses 26-20. Short week, quick turnaround. They got Baltimore Thursday night. Lots of eyeballs on that game. Lots to talk about as it relates to that. Hopefully we get somebody on the beat on the show this week. We can talk about what transpired yesterday. We can talk about Joe Burrow, talk about Joe Flacco, talk about the Bengals defense. Maybe I'm crazy, right? Eye test tells me that the defense got significantly better as far as improvement, right? It's still the same guys for the most part. I'm not expecting this necessarily to continue, but got better the past 2 weeks, and the offense wasn't able to meet it. So we'll have that conversation throughout the week there as well. And big game for Cincinnati coming up on Thursday against Baltimore. Got to find a way to win some of these, right? Because I know a lot of people out there love calling for Zach Taylor's job, and we can start, realistically having that conversation if they continue to lose games. But my expectation is that they'll find a way to win a few of these with Joe Burrow. Especially with the defense seemingly turning a bit of a corner these past 2 weeks. But obviously, we will see. Bengals-Ravens, always crazy, and certainly expect that to be the case on Thanksgiving night as well. That wasn't the only unfortunate game that transpired in this city. By the way, FC Cincinnati lost 4-0. Or 4-0, I should say, to Leo Messi. And I'm not really a soccer guy, but 4-0, that's a blowout, right? So that's obviously not good. There was, good opportunity there at home to kind of, get the city feeling good again. Obviously, that did not end up happening. Not going to spend much time on that. But we will talk about the Cincinnati Bearcats. They played Friday at the Heritage Bank Center against Louisville. I was really excited about that game. Louisville's one of the best teams in the country. They didn't necessarily play like that in the game Friday, which gave UC a lot of opportunity to go out there and make something happen, and they unfortunately let that go by the wayside there as well. So we'll talk about that. UC only scores 64 points in the game, 74-64. Louisville comes into the Heritage Bank Center and wins. As I was mentioning at the top of the show, a lot was made about it being at Heritage Bank, not at Fifth Third. Basically, everybody around the team, anyone that's a fan, is like, yeah, this is ridiculous. This should be at Fifth Third, and then play it at the Yum Center if you play Louisville beyond that. And, the ticket sales, that was, a big story. Obviously, you had Elder and St. X playing down the street at the same time. Hard to believe a high school football game would take some fans away from UC Louisville, but I think it probably did, to be honest with you. And I think there was like 8,500 in the Heritage Bank Center. Tough to see, where the crowd was, like who was, had more of a pool in there. I think there was obviously a lot of red with both teams having red, but kind of felt 50-50. Certainly when Louisville was going on their run there in the second half, place got really, really loud, which isn't ideal, obviously, for Cincinnati. But I think, based on the circumstances, it was fine. But it would have been a heck of a lot better, obviously, if it had been at Fifth Third, and it would have been a lot more of a raucous environment there in that game. But you had plenty of opportunities if you're the UC Bearcats, and that's kind of got to drive you crazy a little bit if you're a fan, or certainly Wes Miller there as well. I believe it was like 7 minutes into the game before Louisville scored a field goal, and this is a team that was averaging over 100 points throughout the beginning of the year to this point, and that's their thing, is they're in a offensively, they're a great team. They're going to shoot it. They're going to run the floor. They're going to play fast. And that wasn't working for them at all. And Scott Springer was joking about the rims when he came on the show last week. And that was kind of what I was thinking when I was sitting there watching that game as well. He wasn't lying here. These shots aren't falling in for the Louisville Cardinals. But they eventually got going in the second half. Conwell was tremendous. He ended with 25. And it was kind of like out of nowhere, too, whereas he was fine in the first half. And then, boom, just came on in the second half, turned up. And same with Michael, the point guard. Right, he's a great player. Watching him in the first half, I didn't realize he's so small or skinny, I should say. But I mean, his dunk in transition was whoa, because you see him as kind of this point guard guy that's kind of a sniper, and he's got range and he's got good vision or whatever, and then he goes on the breakaway and just jumps out of the gym and slams it home. You're like, oh goodness, this guy is going to be a highly drafted guy, certainly as a freshman. I talked about the bigs in this game, and that was an advantage that Cincinnati had, and that was one that they needed to capitalize on this game, and they did that. I was impressed with Mustafa Cham. I thought, he was going to have to be really good for them to have an opportunity to win this game. He was really good for them, especially in the first half. He was a presence there on the boards. Cincinnati was out rebounding Louisville in the first half. That's why they had such a big lead. He had like 3 blocks in the game there as well. If you would have told me that Cham would have played like that, I'd say, oh, you know what? You got a really good chance ultimately to win this game. But it kind of turned into a situation where Louisville wanted Sean Abayev to beat them, and they basically welcomed him to try to do that. And Sean hit a few big shots in the first half that kind of helped them build that lead and helped them kind of hold that lead for a little bit there as well, but then ultimately he just went cold. He went cold, and they were daring him to shoot, and he was shooting, and it wasn't going in. And, look, he's going to be fine. Wes said this after the game. Watching him in person, I was like, okay, yeah, I understand why he was, such a highly touted recruit, right? And I expect him to be fine. Is he going to be one of the best players in the country? I'm not going to get carried away and say that. But, I floated out the idea of him potentially coming off the bench. That doesn't need to happen, right? Sean Abayev will be fine, but he just wasn't shooting the ball well. They were daring him to shoot it. He was shooting it. He was shooting it fine the first half. But after that, it wasn't good enough. And just, he's a freshman too. And that's the biggest game he's played in his whole life, going against a team like Louisville, coached by Pat Kelsey, that has an opportunity, obviously, to win a national title. And, I don't think the moment necessarily looked too big for him, but, there were some shots there that he was open and he didn't hit. And, look, if you're going to go in and beat Louisville, right, if you're going to beat one of the best teams in the country, you got to go shoot the rock. And that goes for anybody. If you want to upset a team in college basketball, a team that's a lot better than you got to shoot the rock. And Cincinnati didn't shoot the rock well enough in this game ultimately to win. Bob Miller. Pat Kelsey talked about this after the game. West, of course, is like, we're not going to make excuses, right? But you didn't have Bob for, the last 8-9 minutes in the game. And it was slipping away from you a little bit, and you still were trailing. But that's your best player. And that was the first time I saw them in person. You've got some guys that, could potentially be your best player, but Bob Miller's your best player, right? And he had the hip injury and wasn't able to go back in the game. And the game really changed there at that point when you lost Bob. And that put you really in a tough spot. Hopefully he can come back soon. UC, by the way, plays tonight against, New Jersey Institute of Technology, I believe is what they're called. So you would think that's going to be a win for the Cincinnati Bearcats. But, that was kind of a game where, you needed Bob out there at the end, and unfortunately he wasn't able to be out there and be on the floor for you. And that certainly hurt. Sincere Harris, watching him in person. That guy is so fast, so quick, and plays with so much juice. At times he's just out of control, and he jumps up, and he's so high in the air, and you're like, oh, my God, he's going to hurt himself. But he brings a lot of juice. He's your perfect guy to come off the bench and just be a crazy man. So I was impressed with him. He's got to shoot it, obviously, a little bit better for Cincinnati. But, you just need Sean Abayev. When you get a guy like that, you need him to be one of your best players. And I think he will for Cincinnati. I have confidence that he will, but he had an opportunity to really shine in this game, and he wasn't able to do that. So that, to me, is what held you back a little bit. Again, you scored 64 points against Louisville. Now, you only ended up losing by 10, but if you went in there the night before the game and said, hey, Wes, you're going to score 64 points in this game, he's probably like, oh, God, we're going to lose by 30 plus, right? That obviously didn't happen, but if you only score 64 against Louisville, not going to be good enough. So the offense went cold. Baba went down. Wasn't ideal. Really impressed with Mustafa Cham. And then, we talked about Day-Day's role changing for this team. It's awesome that Day-Day Thomas is back, right? Now, obviously, he's been here for a while. Hasn't necessarily contributed to a lot of winning, but he's had some good moments, some really good moments as a Cincinnati Bearcat. And when he leaves, people need to talk about Day-Day Thomas. That's a good Bearcat right there in Day-Day Thomas. But the whole idea this year is that his role was going to be a little bit different. He was the leading scorer on the team last year, but now it's like, oh, you got Bob Miller, and you got this guy, Sean Abayev, a freshman, right? And you bring in these other guys there as well, and you got this productivity off the bench, and you got some shooting now, supposedly. His role would look a little bit different, but they need him to score a bunch of points. And I don't know. He can do it, but can he score a bunch of points on a team that makes the tournament? I don't know. Can he be your leading scorer on a tournament team? I don't know. I would like to see his role change a little bit more, but if Baba's going to be out for several weeks, they're going to need Day-Day to score. And, it might look a lot similar to last year where it's like, well, who's going to take the shot? Well, we need Day-Day to take the shot. And I don't know if you can have that be the case on a team that makes the tournament. Again, Day-Day's been tremendous as a Bearcat, made of all the right stuff, great teammate, hustles, right? Again, you see that when you're there in a game. It's hard to necessarily always pick up on that on TV, but when you see these guys going after loose balls live in person, it's like, oh, this guy wants it, right? And Wes kind of talked about that after the game. There was kind of a few loose balls there, especially in the second half, that they didn't get to. But I'm a little bit worried if if they're going to ask that much of Day-Day from a scoring perspective, then it kind of feels like you're stuck in kind of a similar spot you were in last year, as opposed to really taking that step forward in the right direction, obviously, if you're the Cincinnati Bearcats. But, Pat Kelsey, I don't know what we said in half, but it worked. Again, they didn't look like you could say they looked like an unranked team in the first half. Like, obviously, the talent was very obvious for Louisville, but they were not executing at all in the first half. Kelsey said he went in there at half, got after him, and you saw that, right? Because the UC Bigs were really dominating that game, and then Louisville kind of had an advantage there on the block and on the glass in the second half, and that obviously propelled them a little bit there as well. Michael obviously got going a little bit. That was very quiet, 22 points. Where I was like, this guy, he's gotten a lot of hype, and he hasn't really done much. Then you look up, and he's got 22, and he's got a steal, and he's jumping out of the gym dunking. So, they just slowly kind of got going. Same with Conwell there as well. It's like, oh, wow, he's just got 25. Like, where did that come from? So, we're going to see. Obviously, they've got some weaker opponents here. I don't think you should be hitting the panic button necessarily if you're a UC fan. We're all waiting as far as the Baba Miller injury goes, because if he's going to be out for some time, that's going to be a serious issue, because I do think, especially watching that game in person, that he is their best player, and they're going to need him to be their best player as well. But really intrigued with what you saw from Mustafa Abayev. He's a freshman, didn't shoot it well. He'll be okay, I think. Sincere, obviously, off the bench. They keep putting Tillery in the game. I get he's a highly touted guy, but he's not ready to play right now. Tillery is absolutely not ready to play right now, and seemingly every time they put him in, something bad happens. He makes a bad pass. He makes a bad decision. He has a lapse on defense. So I don't know if I was talking with a buddy about this, and he was joking like, yeah, he puts him in there because he doesn't want him to hit the portal next year. And maybe there is something to that, but he's not ready to go right now. And, every time he was on the floor on Friday, something bad happened. So I would probably try to stay away from that. I get at this point of the year, it's November 24th. You're trying to figure out your depth. You're trying to figure out your rotations. It takes time. It's happening all across the country. I understand that. But he doesn't look like a guy that's ready to play right now. And that's okay. A lot of freshmen aren't. But, I would probably hesitate on putting him out there in the lineup a little bit more. But ultimately, you got to shoot it better if you're the UC Bearcats, especially if you're playing Louisville. You understand that. And, you started out dominating the glass. That didn't exactly continue, but at the same time, I'm intrigued, certainly, with what you saw from Mustafa Cham. Not hitting the panic button. It's a really good team. You lost by 10. I think the reason why it stings so bad is because you could have easily won the game, right? If Louisville goes in there and beats you 100-85, you're like, well, yeah, it stinks we lost, but it's like, well, that's Louisville. They score a bunch of points, and, we still scored 85 points, and we feel solid about where we're at. I think the reason why this stings is you go, man, we held them to 74 points, and they didn't score a field goal for the first 7 minutes, and we still lost. But, you lose the game by 10. If you would have told people that going in, they'd say, yeah, there's a reason why the spread was around 9 or 10. So, be interesting to see how they bounce back tonight. Again, it should be a no-brainer, easy win for them tonight, but we'll see. And, I don't think you came in with high expectations this year for Cincinnati basketball, and I don't think they've given you reason to really be super excited, but I still think there's reason to believe that they're going to make this tournament and still be a force in the Big 12, but certainly looking forward to watching them over the course of the next few weeks. The UC football team, on the other hand, that's not good. That is not good at all. They lose to BYU. They've had these opportunities, right? Game day, Utah, Cincinnati. And if you're going to be taken seriously as a program nationally, you have to be able to deliver when the lights are the brightest. And they were bright on Saturday, 8 p.m. slot, Fox. That was the best game at that time. Slot, one of the best games of the weekend, right? It was kind of a down week in college football as we get ready for rivalry week. And you had opportunities there, and you did things that losing football teams do. Special teams mistakes. You missed 3 kicks. That kicker, right? You see kickers throughout my life have stunk, right? But this kid this year has been solid for him. And then when they need him to be at his best, he doesn't perform well. I think the last one wasn't really on him. It was weird snap, weird hold. But the first two is like, dude, you got to make those. And he wasn't able to execute. You go into half, it's like you should be winning the game, and you weren't. The turnovers, right? Sorsby, we talked about this last week where it's like, people were talking about, oh, Sorsby, dark horse Heisman. And we were like, okay, let's be a little bit realistic here. Let's pump the brakes. He certainly came back down to earth. Past few weeks, Arizona, Utah, he's just been flat out bad. And, they got the passing game going in this game. He threw the pick, right? It was bad time to throw a pick where it's like, well, you should have had the lead at the half. Okay, now you're going to get the ball here to start the second half, and then boom, immediately throw a pick. And it's like, now we're really behind the 8 ball here. So now that's several games in a row where he's thrown a pick. He deserves a lot of criticism for that. But, I look at Sorsby in this game. He played well enough to win the game. He played well enough to win the game for the Cincinnati Bearcats. But they just got punched in the mouth, and they didn't respond to it. Now, again, if you make those kicks, you can still get away with the win, right, in this game. But they just got flat out punched in the mouth. That running back for BYU, they just basically said, yep, we're going to give you the ball early and often, and he is going to run right through you. And that's what he did. And Scott Satterfield talked about this after the game. From an initial contact perspective, Cincinnati was there. They met him at the hole. Boom, contact. And then he just finds a way to get like 3 or 4 more yards. And if you can do that at any level of football, you're going to be a dominant force. And that back for BYU was unbelievable. Klein Sataki, their head coach, he deserves a lot of credit. He's been there for a while now, and just his teams, they're gritty, they're tough, they're physical, and they know how to win, right? Some of that Mormon magic for BYU, man. The end of these games, they've gotten in some crazy games this year, and they just find a way to be at their best late, right? And that's certainly, an attribute that all these good teams need to have, right? Now, they're going to have an opportunity probably to play for a Big 12 championship and ultimately a spot in the playoff. I don't view BYU, obviously, as a team that could potentially win the national title, but we talk about this a lot with Ohio State, where it's like, yeah, they're clearly the best team. Yeah, they're amazing. Yeah, they're unbelievable, but they haven't been tested. So when they're in a do-or-die game, a win-or-go-home game, and it's tight late, how are they going to react? Well, a BYU team, again, not comparing the two. BYU's not going to win the national title, but if you're a BYU fan and you're in a close game late, you're like, yeah, we've been here a million times. We've been here a million times, and we seemingly always come out on top there as well. But that was the biggest thing for me is like, yeah, you made too many dumb mistakes for Cincinnati. The 3 missed kicks, the bad interception from Sorsby, and then the fumble there late when you're just trying to get back in the game. You had put together some drives, and they'd kind of stalled out on you, right? You had the missed kicks, and then you're in a spot, I believe it was Cyrus Allen, who caught the ball, and then it was kind of one of those weird plays where it's like he's getting rolled up on. He kind of went into self-preservation mode, and, at first you're like, oh, he's clearly got to be down. Then you look at it again, it's like, well, his hand without the football was down, but that doesn't count. So the ball clearly out. It was a longer view, and then at that point you see it was kind of a tough spot there for the Cats there at that point, but very unfortunate break for them. And that's just got to be what drives you crazy, right? Because there's just so many opportunities. Like, you move the ball, fine. Passing game was fine. Passing game was good in this game, right? And then you stall out. You miss kicks, right? You have turnovers. And when the other team is chewing clock, running down your throat, and protecting the football, you're going to be behind the 8 ball, and that's where Cincinnati found themselves. And when you make that many mistakes against a really good team, you got no chance, and that's ultimately what it was. Again, BYU didn't do anything crazy in this game. Bear Bachmeier throwing the football, they didn't really do much. They just said, you know what, we're going to run it. We're going to run it right at you. You know exactly what's coming. We're going to give it to you anyway, and we're going to be tough on defense there as well. We're not going to make any mistakes, and you're going to make a bunch. And ultimately, BYU obviously going to win the game. Bachmeier deserves a lot of credit. Again, throwing the football, nothing special in this game, but he is huge back there. People have thrown the Tebow comparison out there. Let's not get carried away here, but like from a size perspective and I'm going to run you over perspective, I see it. I get it. But yeah, he's had a tremendous year. And keep in mind, this is a true freshman, right? This is a guy that's, we'll see if, he opts to stay here, but, with this day and age, transfer portal, NIL, he could perhaps stick around a little bit longer there as well. But huge game next week against TCU for the Bearcats. There's a lot to be 8-4 and 7-5. That's a big difference. And especially when you had the end of the year that you had last year where it's just you completely fell apart at the seams. You look up again, and it's happening again, right? It's not as bad as last year, not quite as bad. But what? Now this is a 3-game skid here. Utah, Arizona, and now, of course, BYU. And this is the TCU team that they're a little feisty now. They were one of our best bets of the weekend against Houston. I really like their quarterback, Josh Hoover. He'll throw it to the other team a few times. We understand that, but UC could easily lose this game against TCU. It's not at Nip. It's on the road, so that's a big game for Scott Satterfield. I don't know if Cunningham would make the decision to move off him, but 8-4 and 7-5, that's a big-time difference, especially when the narrative last year was that, well, you can't finish the season. You just kind of no-show. You're in a spot to do that again here. If you lose your final 4 games, you're going to should be probably favored in this game against TCU, but TCU easily could win this game, so that's going to be a big one there for UC. But, yeah, tough weekend for Cincinnati sports, and certainly a tough weekend for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Had their opportunities on national stages to go out there and really make statements, and unfortunate for them, unable to rise to the occasion. All right, a couple of more minutes. We'll go a few minutes longer here on the show. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us. No Reed Mouse this week. He's out. We will be in at the 10 o'clock hour this week, barring any guest situations. If a guest can only do 11, we'll push it back to 11. Follow me on Twitter. Follow the show as well at the Stone Shields for updates. But the plan will be 10 o'clock hour this week. Off on Thanksgiving, but we will have a show on Wednesday, and we will have a show, of course, on Friday. After hopefully the Cincinnati Bengals can beat the Baltimore Ravens with Joe Burrow. That certainly would be exciting. I'll be on the post-game show Thanksgiving night with Craig Sandlin, so certainly looking forward to that. Okay, around the NFL, let's just hit on these a little bit before we get out of here. I mentioned this at the top, kind of going into the weekend. It didn't feel like necessarily there was going to be a ton of good games, but it ended up being a really solid weekend actually in the NFL. Chicago, they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. No Aaron Rodgers. Apparently he wanted to go. Doctors, team, coaches said, you know what, we're going to sit you out for a week, and kind of cost him, right? Rudolph was fine in the game. I mean, he was able to keep him in the game there, obviously. But Ben Johnson, man, has done a tremendous job. And, this Coach of the Year thing is really getting crazy now at this point. Because I said early on that Shanahan's Coach of the Year to me. I would still, if I had a vote, I would probably still give it to Kyle Shanahan, to be honest with you, at this point. But pretty much nobody else is going to agree with that. They're either going to say Vrabel, probably, which, again, great pick. Obviously, they've had a heck of a year one with him. But Ben Johnson is entering this conversation there as well. The Bears are just winning games. They're 8-3, right? Like, who would have thought that was going to happen? And they're not just beating bums either. They've beaten some good quality teams. Caleb Williams is still erratic. He still doesn't complete a very high percentage of his passes, but he's cutting down on the mistakes a little bit. And Ben Johnson's just working with what he's got, and they deserve a lot of credit. Ben Johnson is unbelievable. He was kind of the most hyped head coaching candidate, certainly in a very long time, and he has lived up to it. He could have had his pick of the litter of where he wanted to go, and he picked Caleb Williams in Chicago. Very, noisy media town in Chicago, and a really tough division there as well. And it's, brutally cold there at Soldier Field additionally. And he picked Chicago, and it's working out as they continue to win. I don't think they're better than the Packers or the Lions at this point, despite their record, but we'll see. That's kind of been a surprise team. I wasn't really surprised by the Patriots. I'm surprised they're this good and they've won this many games. I thought they were going to make the playoffs probably, but I didn't think they would be this good. But certainly this Bears and the Colts, of course, have surprised a lot of people as well. They lost. We'll get to that in a second. But this Bears team has been a real surprise at this point this year. The Lions won, took them to the Giants to overtime. Jameis Winston had some magic there. I imagine Dart's going to be back probably next week. They just fired, by the way, the Giants fired their defensive coordinator this morning, Shane Bowen, and just another blown fourth quarter lead. That's like 4 or 5 this year for the Giants, which is just absurd. But the Lions hang in there. Again, Lions, they needed that win. It was probably, a scare for them to be with the Giants in overtime. But that Lion game against Philly was certainly very, very ugly. But they get the win in overtime. The Packers dominate the Vikings 23-6. I was saying it all last week and the week before. Minnesota, you got to trade for Mac Jones. Do whatever you can to get Mac Jones on your team, right? Because if Mac Jones is on your team, you're a playoff team. Right, you've got pieces all over your defense and all over your offense, but you've got an incompetent guy playing quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, and it is not ever going to get better. right? Let's be very clear here. It is not ever going to get better for J.J. McCarthy, and I don't understand. I get it. They have to roll him out there because he's a first-round pick, but like if he was a second or third or fourth-round guy, they would be done with him at this point. But they got to continue to give him some opportunities. Seattle wins. They beat Tennessee 30-24. Look, the Titans are a mess. Good chance they have the first overall pick again, but like I think Cam Ward has shown some stuff. Right? He doesn't have much to work with. His coach obviously got fired after a few weeks. That's always tough for a young quarterback. It's going to be fascinating to see how Tennessee handles this. They're not going to be in a spot to take another quarterback. We've seen a couple of teams do that, right? Was it the Cardinals maybe with Kyler, where it's like they take a quarterback and it's like, well, no, they're picking first overall again. Oh, they'll take another quarterback. Doesn't really happen a ton. Obviously, it doesn't happen a ton that you're picking first back-to-back years either. But Cam Ward showed some stuff. He's shown some stuff. And, again, it's going to be a Simpson or a Mendoza at 1. And do you want to go with one of those guys over at Cam Ward? Probably not. So he's going to have another opportunity here. They got to figure out the coach. They're still a ways away. But they hang in there with Seattle. And Seattle's one of the best teams in this league. So solid performance for the Titans. But obviously they're 1-10 and lucky to even have that one win. Chiefs, it was a do-or-die game for them. And they were down late. Arrowhead Stadium. Offense a little bit clunky. Mahomes still ended up throwing for over 350 yards, but they pick up a win in overtime. They needed it, 23-20. And if you're the Colts, you start looking at their schedule, and you go, well, they're 8-3. That's impressive, but they've got a lot of tough games here down the stretch. And you look at Jacksonville and maybe even Houston in that division could potentially catch Indianapolis. Keep an eye out on that. That's not hyperbolic, I don't think, by any stretch of the imagination. Keep an eye on that potentially happening. Jets lose to the Ravens 23-20. You know, the Ravens' schedule, we knew it was going to get easier. Lamar's back. They're winning games. Steelers are losing. Here comes Baltimore. The defense is getting cleaned up there a little bit. I think this game on Thursday is going to be a banger, especially if Joe Burrow is playing. And both of these defenses have gotten a little bit better. Again, don't crush me. I get the Bengals defense is awful. It's still the worst in the league and will still be one of the worst of all time. But the past 2 weeks has gotten a little bit better, and we'll see how they look against Baltimore because even when they've had fine defenses, they've still given up 1,000,000 points to Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, who kind of has owned the Cincinnati Bengals. So looking forward to that game on Thursday. I was wrong about this one. The Raiders are terrible. I mean, my goodness, I knew that. But I thought Shedeur was going to be a liability for them in this game. And you look at the numbers, right? And people, I'm sure, I haven't watched any or listened to any talk radio nationally today, but I'm sure Shedeur Sanders is going to be leading off all the shows. Oh, could he be the guy to come in here? No. All right, let's not get carried away. They win 24-10. He made some good plays, right? They didn't ask him to do much. They didn't ask him to throw it a lot. I thought he would, take some more bad sacks, and he still was doing that, running behind the line of scrimmage and running backwards a little bit too much. But he didn't make too many crucial mistakes. Did have the one pick, but he's able to get away with that kind of stuff against a bad Raider team. They are in shambles in Las Vegas, as they've been bad for much of my life, but they are just putrid here at this point. And Tom Brady making mistakes, John Spytek making mistakes, Pete Carroll making mistakes, personnel stinks. I mean, if you're a team that's that bad and you're going to take a running back at, 6th overall, what are you doing? I just don't get it. You're going to take a running back behind a bad offensive line. I don't care if you have Adrian Peterson or LaDainian Tomlinson. If you're behind a horrible offensive line, they're not going to be able to do anything. Why would you take a running back there at that pick? It makes no sense to me at all. And then you pass on Sam Darnold, so just whiff after whiff for the Raiders. They're in a bad spot, but I was wrong. I thought they were going to handle Shedeur Sanders, and now we have to listen to all this gibberish about Shedeur potentially being the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. Yeah, we'll see. Interesting to see what Stefanski's going to do because, do you stick with him or do you go back to Gabriel? Or Gabriel's going to be ready to come back at some point here, so that'll be interesting to see how they handle that situation. Jaguars, don't look now, but they're 7-4. They've got some really bad losses this year, but they pull off a win in overtime. Trevor Lawrence does enough. That organization obviously is dysfunctional. I've always kind of, I don't know why, I had a bit of a soft spot for the Jaguars. Just kind of, I don't know, the town of Jacksonville, it'd just be cool for them to be decent and not stink, right? Well, they're decent this year. And I think, Liam Cohen, he did a tremendous job with Baker in Tampa last year, and then he had the introductory press conference where he kind of made a fool out of himself a little bit. But Liam Cohen's a hit. obviously everyone's talking about Ben Johnson, and rightfully so, for all he's been able to do here in year one as a rookie head coach. Combs done a tremendous job. And keep an eye on the Jaguars now. You know, we all kind of said, Indianapolis is going to win that division, no problem. Here comes Jacksonville. Here comes Houston. C.J. Stroud coming back. That division's not quite over yet. What a comeback for the Dallas Cowboys. I guess George Pickens turned into Randy Moss. I mean, holy cow. He's been exceptional for them. Jerry's going to be in a spot where he's going to have to pay him, right? I mean, then they're going to be kind of doing the whole Bengals thing. It's so funny. There's so many parallels between the Bengals and the Cowboys, just from how much, how dysfunctional they are as a franchise. They wait so long to make these decisions. Their defense stinks, and now you're going to be in a situation where it's probably like, they're going to pay both their weapons and pay their quarterback. Kind of what the Bengals are doing there as well. I think you got to pay George Pickens, right? Keep him around because he's been awesome, right? A little immature, doesn't always have his head screwed on properly, but he's playing good football. 9 catches, 146 yards, touchdown. Had a great performance the previous week while he was, out in Vegas the night before. So you got your questions there with his maturity, but he's been awesome for them. What a comeback. Dallas down 21-0, 24 unanswered points. They come back to beat Philadelphia. And, it's interesting. I keep saying chill on Philadelphia. I get it doesn't look pretty. I get it's ugly. I get we don't like the tush push. I get, we're sick of them winning all these games, but they're going to be fine. Well, that's another one where it's like, what are you doing losing that game? You're up 21-0, and your defense is supposed to be really, really good. It is really, really good. I get the Cowboys' offense is really good, but Mo Egger had a tweet about this last night where it's like, I forget exactly what he said, but basically like, sure, Sanders played well and the Cowboys had a huge win. I'm sure everybody is going to be really rational when they're talking about these two things for the course of this week and beyond. Yeah, that's going to be awesome, by the way. Chiefs-Cowboys now just got a heck of a lot better on Thanksgiving. What a slate of games we have on Thursday. You got that and Ravens-Bengals at night. So that's going to be maybe the most watched game ever that's not a Super Bowl or a conference championship. Don't quote me on that, but there's going to be a ton of eyeballs on Chiefs and Cowboys on Thanksgiving, and now it's a huge game, right, which is awesome because, Dallas loses to Philly, and then you're like, what, they're 4-6-1, and it's like, okay, and it's like, well, the Chiefs need to win. Well, the Chiefs win, and the Cowboys win. If the Cowboys beat the Chiefs, they're not out of this thing. So, that's going to be an awesome game there on Thanksgiving. Kirk Cousins, yeah, he played a heck of a lot better than Shedeur Sanders did, but nobody's talking about that. 24-10, they beat the Saints. Saints, tough spot. How many wins they have? They're 2-9. Shuck, okay. 30-43, 243 and a pick. We'll see. I didn't get why they took him as high as they did. Head scratcher to me. Don't think he's an NFL starting quarterback. Now it's like, well, you just picked a quarterback pretty high. You're going to be in a position to pick another one this year. What do you do? Saints are in a really tough spot. And then Baker gets hurt. We talked about the Buccaneers being a fun team. I think a lot of us root for the Buccaneers, right? Baker, he's great. How can you not pull for him? He gets hurt in the game. Don't look now, but the Bucs have dropped to 6-5. Panthers win tonight. All of a sudden, that division's open. So some crazy stuff happening a little bit here in the NFL. Rams look exceptional. We'll see if they did enough to jump the Patriots in my power rankings. But Stafford playing like the MVP. Like at this point, he definitely separated himself. It's a very week-by-week thing. I understand that. You don't want to play Monday morning quarterback and overreact too much. But certainly after this performance this past week, thought it was kind of neck and neck with Stafford and Drake May with a slight edge to Stafford. Well, after this week, I think Stafford has pulled away a little bit. Not to say Drake May can't catch him or somebody else for that matter. But Stafford, unbelievable what he's been able to do this year for the Los Angeles Rams. Good one tonight. Sneaky good one. Panthers and the Niners. Don't think it would surprise anybody if the Panthers got blown out. But from a record perspective, where they're at now, especially with Tampa losing in that division, it's a huge game for Carolina and also a huge game for Brock Purdy and the Niners. His second game back. That will be tonight. Looking forward to that. A couple of quick headlines before we get out of here. We mentioned Chip Kelly fired. Pete Carroll's no stranger to firing coordinators. He's got no problem doing that. Look, Pete is in his 70s. He's probably he doesn't have time to rebuild, right? He looks like, for a guy that I think he's 73, for a guy that's that old, he looks great and he moves around great and he talks great and he's clearly still all the way there upstairs. But he doesn't have time here. And if you're Spytek and Brady, I don't know if you can run it back with Pete Carroll. Again, it's not really his fault. I would honestly blame it more on Spytek and Brady than I do for Pete Carroll. But, yeah, he's got to win now. He fires Chip Kelly. And, by the way, I don't know if he's in Columbus yet, or if I'm Ryan Day, it's like, you got to get here before we play Michigan here on Saturday. We need you. Find a way to get here. Obviously, Chip Kelly didn't do them any favors in winning the Michigan game last year. But I would not be surprised at all. Ryan Day has definitely called him. You can't ever have too many analysts, right? I wouldn't be surprised if he was kind of an analyst for Ohio State the rest of the way. And then, of course, if Hartline left at the end of the year, I think reinsert Chip Kelly back as the OC because, besides that year in Ohio State last year, Chip Kelly had been bad. And I like Chip Kelly, and he's, when he was in Philly, it was fun. He was in Oregon, it was fun. But how things ended there at UCLA, a lot of it because he didn't get fired, right? He left to be the OC at Ohio State. Well, he was going to get fired. Newsflash there. So Chip Kelly has struggled for a long time, had the great year last year, and that's what allowed him to get the contract with the Raiders. But I don't know if there's many people in the NFL that are going to be interested in his services. I think he'll be back in Columbus, but if Hartline sticks around, then maybe not. But I don't know. Wouldn't surprise me if this playoff run for Ohio State, you see Chip Kelly up there with a little scarlet and gray on as a potential analyst for them. But, yeah, Raiders offense is a mess. They're in complete shambles. I think it's unfortunate. We'll spend more time throughout the week on this. But if you're the Raiders, I think you got to trade Max Crosby, right? Because, you look at the guys you have. You got basically 2 players, maybe 3, if Genty pans out if you get a line. But you got questions on that. Brock Bowers is tremendous. Crosby's tremendous. He said that he wants to stay in Vegas, wants to be a part of the rebuild, and wants to be a Raider for life. I think he means that when he says that, by the way. But if you're Spytek and Brady, it's like, we need more picks because we stink. And especially in that division, right? It's one thing if you're in a Tom Brady division, like the bad AFC East or, the NFC South, right? But that's not the case. You got Mahomes with Reed, Sean Payton, that defense. Maybe Bo Nix turns into a solid player at some point, and Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert. Like, you are in trouble in that division, some serious trouble if you're the Raiders. So I don't know if keeping Max Crosby does much for you. I get he wants to be here, and if he wants to be here and doesn't want to get traded, maybe you should respect that because he's been with you through thick and thin. But it's just you got a long way to go if you're the Las Vegas Raiders. This is not pretty at all. A couple of college basketball games tonight that are certainly exciting. St. John's, Iowa State. That's early, 4:30. That's a ranked matchup. That should be a good game. Iowa State, they've been good in recent years. And St. John's, they dropped the one to Alabama, but they're going to be a threat in this thing there as well. And speaking of Alabama, late night, 9:30. Looking forward to that. Bama, Gonzaga. Zags 4.5-point favorites in that game. Bama did a nice job bouncing back, after that Purdue loss, obviously, and that was certainly good to see. But, I think that'll be a really good college basketball game there tonight. Great week, by the way, feast week, college basketball. Bunch of good games here throughout the week. And then, of course, we get the games on Thursday for Thanksgiving, and then a bunch of college games on Friday. Got the Egg Bowl and a couple of more good college football games on Friday as well. So great week for sports, obviously, as always. And, appreciate everybody for hanging out, as always, with us here at the show. Want a couple of extra minutes. And make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Chatterbox Sports, certainly on YouTube as we try to get to 21,000 subscribers. Follow the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, and obviously this will be out in podcast form there as well. We'll take a couple of minutes here and get down in the chat. We've got a couple of people in the chats. And obviously I solo produce this show, so it's hard for me to get into the chat too much. But, we'll take a few minutes here to cycle through the chat. If you have any questions or comments you want me to answer, let me know. Get in the comments. Let's see. Yeah, I think the offensive line, this is to, what we got here, Steve Ross. I think the offensive line was fine, right? Again, it's not going to be great. You're going to have to deal when you're paying Higgins, you're paying Chase, and you're paying Burrow. You need those guys to be great. And beyond that, you just need average or good, right? And the offensive line has been good enough for them to win games. And obviously it hasn't worked out to that point. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Reisner. That's certainly something to monitor. They got the 2 rookies, Fairchild and Rivers. Flacco took the bad sack. It was a coverage sack, knocked him out of field goal range. Can't happen. But, yeah, I think we were talking about this with Paul Dehner Jr. last week. Like, I think there's reason to be optimistic about the offensive line at this point. Xavier did win. How about that? Who would have thought? They're quietly hanging in there, right? You know, we talked about it with Paul Fritcher, like, yo, this might be like one of their worst years ever. They might literally be a bottom feeder in the Big East, but some momentum here for the Muskies. Patino can coach. He can develop. We all know that. You know, getting him was, I think it was an upgrade, right? I was never a Sean Miller guy, but I would rather have Richard Patino than Sean Miller. Maybe that's crazy to say. Probably is, but I stand by that. So he's going to be able to develop these guys. It's just a matter of, you know, how far can you take it? Because there's obviously a lack of talent there, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes. C. Melly, what position do you think is most needed from the draft? A playmaker on defense. I don't care what level. I would say pass rusher, but you clearly don't know how to do that. So maybe take a DB or a linebacker or something. Somebody on defense that could come in and start immediately, right? Caleb Downs is a name that lots of people have thrown out. I'm not going to sit here and say tank for Caleb Downs, but if you continue to lose games and you're in a spot to take Caleb Downs, you take Caleb Downs. You could put Caleb Downs on this team last year, his sophomore year at Ohio State, put him in the NFL, and he is ready to contribute and start right here, right now. He is that good, right? If you had Caleb Downs on this Bengals team, we would still be talking about the playoffs. That is not an exaggeration. Caleb Downs is that guy. He is tough. He's physical. He's always in the right spot. His ball skills are incredible. He's great against the run. He's great against the pass. He's great in coverage. He can rush the quarterback if you ask him to blitz as well. He can return punts. He can literally do it all, and he is ready to be in the NFL. He is a can't-miss guy. There's always a few in these draft classes where it's like, okay, this guy's going to be good. He's not going to stink. There is no bust potential. That is Caleb Downs. He is going to be a good safety in the NFL for a long time. And if he's there on the board when you're picking, I don't care who else is there, right? I literally do not, besides maybe Arvell Reese, but hopefully he's not there. But if he's there, you take him, and you do not think twice about it. He said, C. Melly says, as long as he doesn't tackle like bad on Geno. Yeah, he doesn't. He does not. What else we got here? Ronnie, UC football can't win big games not using their best player. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure who you're referring to here at the spot, but yeah, they've had their opportunities on the big stage this year, and they haven't delivered. And again, we talk about nip at night, but when's the last time they won a nip at night game? Been a long time. Tasden, when you realize the Raiders have just one less win than the Bengals, yes, that's bad. That is really, really bad. And I get the Browns' defense is good, but I thought you would see something in that game from Vegas. You saw nothing at all, so they absolutely stink. C. Melly, Reese Hyper, is he legit? He is absolutely legit. I am not an Ohio State guy either, and I say that with full confidence. I think there is a real world where he goes 1 overall in the draft. I think that is a real possibility. Don't be surprised if that happens. In the NFL, they're going to say, all right, going to need you to gain about 20 pounds, and you're looking at Micah Parsons 2.0. Like, that's kind of where you're at with him. He's unbelievable. He's, linebacker now. I think he's going to be more of just kind of an edge guy, outside linebacker, edge rusher guy in the NFL. But he's got great speed, though, too, as well. But, of course, Micah Parsons can run. But I look at him and I see, yep, he's going to gain some weight and be Micah Parsons 2.0. Arvell Reese is the real deal. Ah, yes, Joe Royer. Yes, fair. That's totally fair. What else we got here? Just taking a few minutes, answering some questions, comments in the chat. This will not be out on our podcast, just an FYI, but wanted to spend some time in the comments. Everett Henry, JJ is truly horrible. As a Jefferson fantasy manager, I am in shambles. Yeah, I've been on this for a while. I don't understand why they took him, right? I get he played fine in huge moments in college. I like seeing that when you're drafting a guy, especially a quarterback, right? Played well against Ohio State, played good in their playoff run when they won the national title, but he wasn't asked to do much, right? I think it's 2 of his best games in his college career were probably against Ohio State, where he had, throw the football a few times and made some good throws. But I mean, people joke about him being a handoff merchant. Like, he was under center, he was turning around, he was handing the football off. And like taking him before Bo Nix is crazy to me, based on what they did at college. You saw that clip of Sean Payton kind of joking about that. Like they tried to act like they were going to trade up and pick McCarthy, or they wanted McCarthy, but they had no interest in J.J. McCarthy. And that's the thing. Whereas you talk about fit all the time in the NFL, right? If it doesn't work in Minnesota with O'Connell and a great defense and Justin Jefferson and a run game, it's not going to work, right? Like Sam Darnold with the Jets, it's like, well, you don't know he stinks, right? He was the Jets and the Panthers, the two most dysfunctional organizations in the NFL. You didn't know that it wasn't going to work for him, right, in that spot. Baker with the Browns, like you didn't know that wasn't going to work. Mac Jones with a defensive coordinator calling the plays, you didn't know, right? If it doesn't work in Minnesota, it's not going to work, right? And I think you got to rip the Band-Aid off. The Niners did a great job of that with Trey Lance, where it was like, because they needed him to be a plug-and-play guy, Trey Lance, right? And clearly that was not happening because they had a roster that was ready to win right now. It wasn't happening, and luckily for them, they had Brock Purdy that they took in the same draft in the 7th round. Vikings don't have that guy, but again, if you could just trade for Mac Jones is the name I keep saying, I think you're a playoff team. Everett, wild that Chip Kelly is gone. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to defend him for what they've done on the field, but when you pay a guy, that much money, highest paid coordinator in the NFL, and he doesn't even get to Thanksgiving, yeah, it's crazy. And, I would expect him to kind of get back with Ohio State in some capacity. Thoughts on Myles Murphy? Not a first-round guy, right? Like, if you took him in the 5th round, okay, fine. But when you take guys in the 1st round, you need them to be one of your best players. Like, that's just how it works in the NFL. And you've seen some signs of growth for him. He's going to be on the team next year, but no reason to pick up his 5th-year option, by the way. But, yeah, it's a very significant disappointment. Yeah, Chip Kelly was making more money than Zach Taylor. That's crazy, but true. Couple more minutes here. If you got any questions, let me know. William House, an old friend, he's in the comments. What's up, William? Appreciate you. AJ says, fire John Cunningham. I'll be interested to see what they do with Satterfield. Very interested. Because I feel like he's probably back, but it's like, well, I don't know. Dave Portnoy had Skyline. That's cool. He put the crackers on the 3-way, which I respect, but that's not my call. But I mean, you gotta, if you're making it like that, you gotta open it up, put the hot sauce on the chili, then the cheese on the hot sauce, and then eat it. Crackers on the side. He went crackers on it, but yeah, at least he liked it. C. Melly, again, appreciate all the questions from C. Melly. He says, if you were a betting man, is Zach Taylor here next year? Yes, he is. Everett says, is Trace okay? Oh, yeah, Trace is doing great. He's doing phenomenal. He was just on a Chatterbox Reds episode last week, so check that out. I gave his thoughts on Kyle Schwarber, which certainly is very interesting. Schwarber, of course, spoke at an event in Middletown, of course, his hometown, very close to downtown Cincinnati. And, yeah, it certainly sounded like he had interest in coming home. But, yeah, that video is up on the channel. Check that out. I also think they put one out this morning, Nick Kirby and I think it was Bryce Spalding with him as well. So make sure you check that out on the channel. Mouse Cop, do you work for Chatterbox or Queen City Screens? Great question. Very funny. Ronnie is disappointed in Chris Jenkins. Yes, Chris Jenkins has been significant disappointment. Significant disappointment. One of those Michigan guys that just isn't good, right? And I've supported Dax for a while. Dax had some good moments in the game. He also had some bad moments. in the game as well. So, yeah, Jenkins. I mean, that's a second-round pick. Again, that's not a first-round pick. It was a second-round pick. That needs to be a hit more times than not. And they can't draft in the second round either. Tasden has heard from Schwarber's cousin that he has interest in returning home to the Reds. Get it out there. Tasden Bailey. He's got a source. And he thinks Schwarber's coming home. Everett says ham or turkey. I mean, Thanksgiving is turkey, right? But like Christmas, ham. Right? So I would say I prefer ham to turkey, but not on Thanksgiving, if that's what you're asking. AJ. What's it going to take for Duke to get fired? I don't know. I do not know. And that's unfortunate because he has made plenty of decisions that warrant him being fired. But again, it feels like I've said this a lot. Bengals organization very much mom and pop run business, and it feels like Duke is in with the Blackburn family and ownership, and I would be surprised to see them make a change, to be completely honest with you. But I don't know. Because to answer your question, if they don't fire him after this year, then there is nothing that it will take for them to fire Duke Tobin, right? I think there's every reason imaginable for him to be fired, and if he doesn't, then he's never going to get fired. Ben says, thoughts on us going on a run? Yeah, I think they're going to win games. Winning out would be 9-8. That's not going to happen, but I think they get to 7 wins, honestly, if Burrow's playing, right? Especially if the defense is going to play like they have the past 2 weeks. You got 3 tough games here, Baltimore, Buffalo, Baltimore. So that's really going to dictate, where you're at, and then 3 easy ones to end the year. But, yeah, I mean, with Joe Burrow coming back, I would expect them to win probably get to 7, right? Probably win 4. Yeah, I'd say win 4 the next 6, honestly. I think that will happen. And obviously that's going to frustrate a lot of people because it's going to be a much worse draft pick, and it's probably going to save a lot of people their jobs. But, it's hard for me to see Joe Burrow coming back and this team not winning some games. Yes, prime rib obviously would be elite. Tasman says, do you like to hunt or fish? I like fishing, but I haven't been in quite some time, and I definitely need somebody that knows what they're doing to be with me. But I enjoy fishing. I would like to get into that a little bit more, I would say. Yep, Ronnie, what a horrible sports weekend. Unbelievable, he says. Yeah, I mean, even the soccer team can't even produce out there. I didn't watch any of that game or any of that match. But 4-0, they lose to Messi. So just, brutal. Bengals, UC had some opportunities there, national TV, to make something happen, and obviously that did not happen there either. All right, we'll do that from time to time, especially here, obviously, when Reed is out, so no off the bench. But, yeah, we were live for about an hour and a half today. Podcast will be up shortly. Be on the lookout for that, obviously. Appreciate everyone as always. Plan will be 10 o'clock tomorrow live here at the channel, so make sure you stick around for that tomorrow. And hopefully we have some more guests this week. No show on Thanksgiving, but we will be Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday this week. Appreciate everyone as always, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.